The Lantern and the Sea. In a small coastal village, there stood a lighthouse perched on the edge of a cliff, watching over the vast, dark sea. It had been there for as long as the villagers could remember, its light piercing the darkness to guide ships home. The lighthouse keeper, an older man named Elias, had lived there alone for many years. His days were spent walking along the rocky shore, watching the waves crash against the cliffs, and caring for the light that never went out, no matter how fierce the storm. But there was something he did in the quiet hours before dawn that no one knew. Elias had an old lantern, a brass one, its surface worn and polished by years of use. Every night, as the winds would begin to rise and the villagers would settle into their homes, Elias would walk down from the lighthouse to the beach with the lantern in his hand. He would step into the sand, letting the cool breeze brush across his face, and he would light the lantern. The small flame would flicker, casting long shadows on the sand. He would walk slowly, pausing at times as if listening to something distant. Most nights the villagers didn't notice his ritual. They were asleep, wrapped in their dreams, the sound of the waves a soothing lullaby in the background. But one evening, when the moon was full and the stars scattered across the sky like diamonds, a curious woman named Arya, who had recently moved to the village, noticed Elias. She had been walking along the beach, her thoughts swirling in a gentle storm of their own, when she saw the light in the distance. At first, she thought it was a ship far off, but the light did not sway like the ship's lanterns did. Instead, it seemed to move steadily as if it had a purpose. Intrigued, Arya walked closer, the sand soft beneath her feet, the sea whispering in her ears. As she approached the light, she saw Elias. He was an old man, his face weathered by time, his posture hunched but graceful in its own way. The lantern flickered gently in his hands. "Good evening," Arya called, her voice carrying over the wind. Elias turned slowly, as if he had been waiting for her, and smiled. His smile was warm, but there was a quiet sadness in his eyes. "Evening, my dear," he replied. "I'm just taking the lantern for a walk." Arya, always curious, tilted her head slightly. "A walk? Why? Doesn't the lighthouse keep the ship safe?" "It does," Elias said, "but sometimes the sea needs a light of its own." Arya frowned, her brow furrowing in confusion. "But the lighthouse is always lit. What does the sea need with a light?" Elias chuckled softly, the sound like the rustling of leaves. He turned to the sea, his gaze distant, as though it was speaking to him in a language only he could understand. "You see, the sea isn't just a body of water. It has moods like people do. Sometimes it's calm and sometimes it's angry. Sometimes it's silent and sometimes it's full of whispers. But all of it is part of the same thing. The sea never truly sleeps. It doesn't rest like we do. It has stories to tell, even when no one is listening." Arya stood there in silence for a moment, watching the way Elias seemed to converse with the waves, his lantern casting a soft glow on the water. "Do you think the sea has stories?" she asked after a while. "I know it does," Elias replied. "It's filled with memories, with journeys, with lives lived and lost. And sometimes in the quiet hours it calls out to those who can hear. The lantern helps me listen. It helps me remember." Arya was still puzzled. "But how does the lantern help you listen?" Elias looked at her then, his eyes soft but knowing. "The lantern doesn't just light the way. It shows you where the darkness is. And sometimes the darkness is where the most important things hide." That night, as Arya walked alongside Elias, she felt a strange calm settle over her. The wind had quieted, and the rhythmic sound of the waves seemed to take on a deeper resonance. The lantern's flicker, soft and steady, seemed to pull her in closer to the vastness of the sea. After some time, they came to a small cove where the water lapped gently at the shore, and Elias stopped. He placed the lantern on a rock and looked out at the water. The moon had begun its slow descent toward the horizon, casting silver streaks across the surface of the sea. "Sit with me," Elias said, his voice gentle but firm. "We'll listen together." Arya hesitated but then sat down beside him, folding her legs beneath her. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence around them was heavy but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that wasn't empty but full of possibilities, of things that might be said, of things that had been said long ago. For what seemed like hours, they sat there in the quiet, watching the waves rise and fall, feeling the pull of the world as it turned beneath them. Elia's hand rested on the rock beside the lantern, his fingers lightly touching the cool surface. "You see," Elias finally said, his voice low, almost a whisper, "the sea doesn't ask for anything. It simply is. It doesn't demand attention, but it needs it. We all need it, don't we, to be seen, to be understood." Arya nodded, her heart softening. She had always lived her life in search of something to hold, something to change, something to define her. But here, beside the sea, she realized she had never truly given herself the chance to simply be. Not like the sea, not like Elias, who had found peace in the flow of time, in the space between breaths. "What do you hear?" Elias asked her. Arya closed her eyes, listening carefully. The sound of the water, the wind in the trees, the faraway calls of birds still awake, she could hear all of it, but there was something deeper, something subtle that she hadn't noticed before. "I hear peace," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "It's strange. It feels like everything is just right. Even though I don't know what's next, it's okay." Elias smiled, and for the first time that night, Arya saw the full weight of his years, his experience, and his expression. "That's the sea," he said. "It doesn't rush to the future. It doesn't live in the past. It simply exists in this moment fully." They sat there for a long while, until the first hints of dawn painted the sky in hues of pink and lavender. The lantern had gone out, but neither of them moved. The sea had shared its quiet wisdom, and for that, they were both content. As the sun finally broke free from the horizon, painting the world in gold, Arya turned to Elias. "I think I understand now," she said. "I hope so," Elias replied with a quiet smile. "But remember, the sea is always changing. It's never the same twice. Life is like that too. It's a journey, a quiet walk with a lantern." Arya stood and stretched, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. Elias nodded. "No need for thanks. Just take the light with you wherever you go." And with that, Arya left the beach, her heart full of a quiet peace she hadn't known she was missing. She knew she would carry the lantern's light with her for the rest of her days. As the years passed, Arya returned to the village, visiting the lighthouse and the beach whenever she could. And on quiet nights, she would walk along the shore with a lantern in hand, not to guide anyone else, but to guide herself, to remember that the sea, like life, was vast, mysterious, and filled with wisdom for those who were willing to listen. And sometimes, just before dawn, she would sit by the water, her lantern softly flickering, and listen. For the sea, in all its moods, always had something to say. The Waking Garden. There was a place, not too far from the bustling cities and their endless clamor, where time seemed to move a little slower. A place tucked deep within the valley of a forgotten forest, where the earth was rich, and the trees stretched their limbs high above, embracing the sky. In the heart of this valley there was a garden. Not just any garden, but one that was whispered about in legends, a garden that woke in the silence of the night. It was said that the garden held the secrets of life's deepest questions, that it could soothe the weary soul, and that, if you knew how to listen, it would share its wisdom. But there was one thing no one knew for certain. The garden could only be entered at dusk. A young woman named Myra had heard the stories since she was a child. They came to her in the form of old folk songs sung by her grandmother, stories passed down like precious heirlooms. It was said that those who wandered through the garden's gates would come to understand the true nature of the world of time and of their place in it. And so, after many years of restlessness, When the weight of the world outside had become too much to bear, Myra decided to seek it out. She packed a small bag with provisions, though she wasn't sure what she might need, and set out toward the valley where the garden lay. It took her several days to reach it. The path was not marked by signs or trails, but was something that could only be followed by instinct. The deeper she walked into the forest, the quieter it became. The trees grew denser and the air thicker, as if the forest itself were drawing her in, embracing her. One evening, as the sun began to dip low in the sky, Myra reached the edge of a small clearing. In the middle of it stood a wrought iron gate, ornate and elegant but covered with creeping vines. The gate was ajar, as though it had been waiting for her. Her heart beat faster. She stepped forward cautiously at first, but as she passed through the gate, a strange calmness washed over her. The garden stretched out before her, its paths winding like threads of an intricate tapestry, its flowers glowing softly in the twilight. The colors seemed deeper here, richer somehow, as though the light itself was different inside the garden. She wandered down the stone pathways, the air cool and fragrant with the scent of jasmine and lavender. In the distance, she could hear the gentle murmur of a stream, and the faint rustling of leaves as if the garden itself was alive and breathing. It was then that she saw him, an old man bent slightly with age, tending to the flowers with gentle care. His hair was long and silver, his skin tanned from years of sun, and his eyes, though aged, sparkled with an energy that seemed timeless. He was humming a soft tune as he worked, his movements fluid and slow, like he was part of the garden itself. Myra approached him, her steps quiet on the soft earth. "Excuse me," she said, unsure of how to begin. "Is this the garden, the one that wakes at night?" The old man looked up, his eyes crinkling in a smile. "Ah," he said softly, "you found it then. You must be Myra." Myra blinked in surprise. "How did you?" He chuckled, the sound rich and warm. "This garden knows everyone who comes here. It's part of its nature to remember. It knew you would arrive, and it has been waiting for you." Her heart quickened. How does it know? How could it possibly know? The old man paused, straightening up slightly as he carefully placed a rose in its place. "It knows because it's been here longer than we can fathom. It remembers everything that has ever lived and everything that ever will." Myra took a step closer. "And what is it waiting for me to learn?" The old man's smile softened. "That, my dear, is for you to discover. I am merely here to help you listen." He motioned for her to follow him, and she did, her curiosity growing with each step. As night began to fall, the garden took on a new life. The flowers seemed to shimmer more brightly in the growing darkness, their petals unfolding as though in response to some unseen force. The air grew cooler, and the sky above, once clear, began to fill with stars. Myra and the old man walked deeper into the garden, passing through arched gateways made of intertwining branches. Each step brought her further into the heart of the garden, where the scent of the blossoms grew stronger, intoxicating almost. Finally, they came to a small pond, its surface smooth like glass, reflecting the sky above. Around the pond were flowers unlike any Myra had ever seen, exotic blooms with colors that shifted and shimmered, like a living aurora. The moon hung low above them, casting a soft silver glow over everything. The old man turned to her. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the stone bench by the pond. "This is where we will begin." Myra sat down, her legs folding beneath her, her heart pounding in her chest. The garden, the man, the night, it all felt surreal, as though she had entered another world. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Listen," he replied simply. For a long while they sat in silence, the only sounds being the gentle rustling of leaves and the soft ripple of water. Myra's mind wandered, restless at first, but as the minutes passed, the quiet began to seep into her thoughts, and she found herself slowing, her breath deepening. Then, just as the clock struck midnight, something extraordinary happened. A single flower by the edge of the pond began to open. It started as a small bud, but with each passing second, its petals unfurled, revealing an intricate spiral of vibrant colors, deep purples, rich blues, and bright yellows. Myra watched in awe. "Is that a bloom?" the old man said softly. "But not just any bloom. This is the flower of time." Myra's brow furrowed. "The flower of time?" "Yes," he replied. "This flower only blooms once every 100 years, and when it does, it reveals a secret of time itself." Myra leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "What secret?" The old man smiled again, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "You must listen carefully. The secret is not something you can hear with your ears. It's something you must understand with your heart." She sat in silence, watching as the flower continued to bloom. It was mesmerizing, its colors shifting in ways that defied explanation. As she stared at it, she felt something stir within her, a deep yearning, a longing for something she couldn't quite place. And then, as though in response to her thoughts, the garden seemed to pulse. The flowers around her began to glow more brightly, their colors becoming more vivid, more alive. Myra closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the rhythm of the garden, the pulse of life that flowed through it. It was as though the garden was alive, not just with plants and flowers, but with the very essence of time itself. She didn't know how long she sat there, but when she opened her eyes again, the flower had fully bloomed, and the world around her seemed to have shifted. The air felt different, softer somehow, and the moonlight seemed to glow with a new intensity. The old man stood beside her, his expression serene. "Do you understand now, Myra?" She nodded slowly, though she couldn't quite put the feeling into words. "It's as if I'm part of something much larger, something timeless." He smiled, his eyes wise. "That's right. Time is not a straight line. It's a circle, a continuous dance of moments, each one important, each one connected. The garden understands that, and now so do you." As the night wore on, Myra felt herself growing more at peace, more attuned to the rhythm of the world around her. She realized that the garden had not just been a place, it was a reflection of her own inner world, a place of rest and understanding. Before she left the garden, the old man handed her a small, delicate flower, its petals glowing softly in the dark. "Take this with you," he said. "It will help you remember." Myra took the flower in her hands, feeling its warmth. She knew somehow that it was more than just a physical flower. It was a symbol of the knowledge she had gained here, the wisdom of time, of the garden, of herself. "Thank you," she whispered. The old man smiled, his eyes twinkling with a deep, knowing light. "Remember, Myra, the garden will always be here, and so will you. The cycles of time never end." Myra turned and walked away, feeling the cool breeze of the garden at her back, the soft glow of the flower in her hands. She didn't know where life would take her next, but she felt certain of one thing. The garden had given her a gift she would carry with her forever, the gift of peace, of patience, and of understanding that all things in their own time bloom. As years passed, Myra often returned to the garden, though she never found the old man again. But sometimes, on the quietest nights, she would sit by the pond, the flower in her hands, and listen. The garden, like time, never ceased its eternal rhythm. And with every visit, Myra understood more of what the garden had shown her. Life was not about rushing forward, but about listening, being present, and appreciating each bloom as it came. And so she lived, not hurried, not anxious, but in tune with the quiet, eternal dance of time.
you.